Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast. It's David Waldas here with Nick Musica again. Today's topic is ultimately what is aligned living and why did the aligned living system come through? Why have I created it out of the download that I got about it? And what that means, of course, at the personal level. But really what I want to talk about today, what we're going to talk about today is the idea of what ultimately is about. Like, what's the bigger picture? What is it that we're really creating with this work? And it's something I haven't talked a lot about because I think it's a part of me that felt like people are going to be drawn into, how is this going to shift my life? How is this going to make my experience of being different than it has been? How is it going to upgrade me and improve the way I experience the world? Open up my intuition, bring more fulfillment, bring more enjoyment, all those things we're always talking about. Yet when I got this download, there was something, far bigger that was happening here. And I always felt like, well, that's kind of a later discussion because people are going to want to hear about, what is my experience? And while there's a truth in that, I think that it was probably rather short-sighted for me to not see the connection people would feel with the bigger mission. And, it was just showing up this morning as Nick and I were talking, as we often do before we record, what the bigger mission is. And I started to kind of share about it. And I was like, wow, that feels way more important than it ever has for some reason. It feels way more appealing in the sense of, I think people that are involved in this work are going to start to connect with that bigger mission. And I think that, I don't know if it's something about the energy that's shifting now. Obviously, there's been a lot of really intense energy happening. But there's this calling, I think, for us to feel like something bigger that we're a part of, that we're creating, and that it's not just about us. And so we're going to talk about what that bigger vision is today and kind of how it breaks down. And so, yeah, welcome, Nick.
Thanks, David. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. So why don't I just jump in and talk about, the information that came through with the download. And so, if you've listened to the podcast at all, you probably have a pretty good idea of the Aligned Living System is about creating a shift in our experience of where we locate our consciousness, at a different place inside of ourselves where we're much more intuitive, we're much more in touch with our truest self, not so impacted and influenced by our surroundings and the energies of other people and their desires and all the push and pull that's happening. But we create this place where we're just much deeper in touch with ourselves. And so, absolutely, that is kind of the user experience of this. If I can borrow some of Nick's publishing and SEO world.
That's funny and relevant all at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So you're UX, right? Is that the right term?
Close. Yeah, I mean, other people are. I employ some of it without getting into the details, but yes, yeah.
Right,
but
well,
the user experience of the things.
And so, absolutely. And so what is that ultimately connected with? Like, why is this important? And so here's the breakdown on it. And this is what I was shown. Let's see, what that would have been 8 years ago when I first got this download. And it was funny when I did get this, it was a little bit futuristic. It was a little bit like when I'd shared these ideas with people, it often wouldn't stick. It often wouldn't quite resonate fully. And what I've found in the last couple of years is that's completely shifted. We're in a new experience of being where this is super relevant. And, spending those first 6 years establishing this and dialing it in and working with the people that it was relevant to, it's really about now. And so, so here I'll break down the kind of the bigger deal of why it is that we're doing this and what it's about is ultimately, the earth is in this big shift, right? Where, you may have heard people talking about this multidimensionality, how there's this old earth that's been very three-dimensional, very dense, very stuck. It provides things like war. It provides things like division. It's all that duality. It's good and bad. It's people against each other, less cooperation, all the stuff that we've seen, excuse me, throughout the history of our planet. And we're in this really miraculous time right now where we're moving into these new energies that really have a higher dimensional aspect to them. And the way that I see it, it's like a fifth dimensional aspect. And, I don't want to spend too much time talking about what that means, but ultimately it moves us out of that duality consciousness where everything has its opposites and we're always battling back and forth between war and peace and good and bad and right and wrong and black and white and all of those things, that it moves us into a more unity-based experience that is going to be much more positive. It already is. We're just seeing a lot of contrast on the planet now with that battle that's happening as we move into this energy. And so with that being ultimately what's happening on the planet, aligned living, when we move into that alignment, what we're really doing is moving into this higher dimensional place, this fifth dimensional place within inside of ourselves, where we're not caught up in that push and pull anymore. And it's why when people go there, they go, it's really weird for me when I try to think about negative things or get drawn into the what's wrong. It's hard to access here because what I'm really feeling is what's right, what my next right action is, what my forward movement is, what's in alignment with me. And I don't have that contrast, that conflict in me anymore. And so when we stabilize there, that is the energy that we're creating. And that's where the earth is moving to. That's going to be and is becoming the frequency of our planet, the vibratory experience of being here that changes our experience. And so it doesn't just happen on its own, right? Sure, the planet's changing, but humanity is shifting and the consciousness of humanity is shifting. And so ultimately what we're doing with aligned living is going to that location, to that kind of future place that isn't really future. It's something we can locate in now, stabilizing there, establishing a stability there by being there and inviting other people to be there. And, and again, aligned living is not the only thing doing this, but this is our piece of the puzzle, our contribution. And when we stabilize there, what we're ultimately doing is creating this kind of beacon, this stabilized place that when other people are around us and are in the energy, they're naturally invited into joining us there. And when we do that, there's kind of this mission, this sense of purpose that says, I'm playing an important role in shifting the consciousness of humanity by cooperating with the shifting of the consciousness of the planet, seeing what's happening, establishing myself in this new place that changes my thinking, changes the way I interact, changes the way I view myself, puts me in touch with my fulfillment, puts me in touch with my greater purpose. And then I help other people just through my presence and my stability in that place to go there as well. And the bigger picture, the more of us doing this, the more of us establish it in that place, the more it invites humanity's consciousness to go there, the more it shifts the way people think, the way they interact, what they're drawn to, and it changes everything. And so the last thing I'll say on this before Nick and I get into the actual conversation about this is that people are so worried about shifting people's perspectives on politics, on war, on government, on all of these things that there is this duality battle happening, and nobody's listening to the other side. People are so stuck in their thinking that they're not reflective, they're not open to another opinion. And so many people are also feeling, well, I have this duty to really keep educating other people, because if they only understood, they would think differently. If I could just bring them into this thinking, we'll all be okay. But the truth is that thinking comes from consciousness. It comes from where people are stabilized in their consciousness. And I see this every time I take somebody into alignment, into their flow. They think differently instantly. They're not trying to push back against stuff that they're in struggle with. They're not, trying to make everybody else different. They're simply feeling their own alignment, and the problems, the negativity, all the shit that draws us into that old energy isn't there anymore. And it's become so clear to me that the answer to helping people evolve into a thinking that's going to allow our planet to survive, allow humanity to survive and thrive, is not about education. It's about consciousness. And when we're doing our part to shift people's consciousness, their perspective changes instantly. And their perspective isn't going to change unless their consciousness changes. And when we just talk to them about perspective, all we're doing is helping them lock in, dig in their heels more, cross their arms more, and get more stuck and just try to convince us. And then we get dragged into it. And so ultimately, like what we're doing with this work, creating this new place that is becoming more and more established on this planet, stabilizing it, living from there, inviting other people into that consciousness where their thinking shift, where their interaction shifts, just as ours had. And we're impacting the planet in this powerful, beautiful way. And that really is the bigger mission of aligned living and what we're doing here. We just often talk about it on what does this mean in your life at a personal level, but it's not really about any of us. It's about the shift in consciousness of humanity, the thinking that changes with that, and then the outcomes that are created from that and the new world that is happening and evolving into. It just looks really ugly in the process. So it can make us feel like there isn't hope, like there's nothing but struggle. And when we put our energy into that struggle, that's what we get. When we put our energy into consciousness, something magical happens quickly and instantly, really instantly. Yeah. So, Nick, are you here?
I'm still here. I'm still here. Yeah. I'm just listening. I'm listening. I mean, so I was thinking as you were chatting about like, so how do we contextualize that for present day? Like, how do we really land it? And one of the, at least in my world, there's this big talk about artificial intelligence. I don't know how much other people are hearing this, and it presents in quite a few different ways. One could be through medical and robotics and surgery, and there's some amount of it at play there, or reading X-rays and finding something, right? So there's some pretty nice benefits to it.
Sure.
And some of it is, the drones that we create and then fly in over places and bomb villages. And so I'm not an engineer, so what I'm going to say is completely wrong. Also, the idea is right. It's the same technology.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing.
What is it used for?
But what is it used for? And there's, I have this dialogue in my own head of, the technology, the ability of the technology that we're creating far exceeds, thank you, our ability to properly manage it from a place of integrity, from a place of thinking about what it could look like. For individuals, for groups of people, et cetera, because because look what I just did, right? And the most simple example of this is creating, very strange and wonderfully Disney-esque type looking images using AI tools, and I can do it all day long. Well, what we're not hearing enough about is the load on the servers and the water that's needed to cool the servers, and there's an environmental cost to this.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. Electricity, kind of like
all of it.
We talk about cryptocurrency, right? Same kind of thing.
Same. Yeah. But the excitement about this Disney-esque image is the headline. And there's just not a lot of thought and consideration around what's going on with this thing. So with the aligned living, go ahead.
I was going to say that is part of the consciousness now, right? Is like,
absolutely,
we live in a world that doesn't feel good. When we find feel good things, it's very easy for us to get compartmentalized in them, focus on the feel good and not see the bigger picture, or people do the opposite and they go, oh my God, AI is so dangerous. It's going to replace, like, they're going to start putting implants in people. Like everything's going to go, it's going to take over. We need, that catastrophizing piece, and some people are seeking the excitement and the play, and some people are seeking the, like, wake up people, like the sky is falling. And again, duality, right? It's all in that there's something wrong. And this is about consciousness. And so if you're listening and you're thinking like, well, I'm in those things, absolutely. And so many people's sense of purpose in life is connected to those, like, well, I'm fighting against this. And I get it, right? Like I spent much of my life doing the same thing. Something very interesting happens when our consciousness shifts and we stabilize and we go, well, shit, like I'm just entangling. I'm blowing up the energy around this thing. And when I move into this place where I can navigate those threats in a forward moving, aligned way, all of a sudden we're not entangled in the threat anymore. We're actually, I think this is probably where you're going with this too, is like, now we're going like, what is the positive part of this? And that's what we
100%.
link into. How do we pull it forward and have it be, because from a higher consciousness, we can handle these, weapons, if you're going to look at them that way. We can handle these influential things, but if we are doing it from a lower consciousness, we're going to use it for manipulation. We're going to use it for control and power and shutting people down. And the moment we're playing that game, we lose,
Totally.
even if we're fighting it.
Yeah. And those people who are using it for manipulation, et cetera, could be explicit because their own gain, or implicit because they're apathetic too. Just don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it all the time, like all these agendas that are happening, like they're kind of just out in the open. They're said and people still don't see it, but it's almost like, again, it's a whole rabbit hole to go down. I think it'll just distract us today. But that whole idea of like the moment we're entangled with that, we're contributing, we're keeping that consciousness alive. And when we move into a new consciousness, which is, it's simple, it's easy. That's what the aligned living system does, and stabilize there. Like we're building something new, and all that good, bad stuff starts to fall away. And it's about next right action. It's about being in touch with our truer self. And even all these people that are doing negative shit, like I've watched people completely shift, what their intentions are. Like, oh, that doesn't feel good to me anymore. That felt good to me because I felt powerful. Now I feel powerful. I don't need that to feel powerful. And now there's something else that makes me like, I know who I need to be in order to stabilize this. And that old thing's not appealing anymore. And it's instantaneous because it's like a location of our consciousness where different things are appealing, and what's out of alignment is not appealing anymore, because we were just trying to resolve something inside of ourselves that now from this place is resolved. And it is that simple.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that it is. It is. It's assuming you allow yourself to stay in it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, there's a whole lot of trust in that. There's a whole lot of letting go in that. There's a whole lot of not repeating bad unproductive patterns of getting tangled into things, but instead creating the things and the outcomes that you want that are more of service.
Yeah. And it's when the more of us that are there, the easier it is to stay there. And so like I said, when I got this download originally in 2016, like it was hard for me to stay there. It took, constantly resetting myself, going back and basically helping to establish that consciousness as a grounded place here. And, as the earth has moved more into that, like the physical earth and the energies that are hitting the earth and more humanity, now it's like when I take people there, it's just a location. It's like, oh, I can choose to be here. I can choose to be there. Before it was like, it was like we were establishing the location. And now the location is just there. And now it's a choice of like, do I want to live here? Do I want to live there? Well, I got a whole bunch of stuff still in that other place. So I'm going to keep popping back and forth for a while until I decide, you know what? It hurts every time I go back to that old world. And it does, like, I don't like my thinking. I don't like the way I show up. I don't like the way I treat myself or other people. Like we get to a kind of, fuck that. Like, this is really where I want to live from. And it just, sometimes some people are just instant and they're just like, I was already done there. And now that I have an alternative, like easy. And some people, it's like, we have to get sick of ourselves. We kind of have to go through and just experience ourselves in both locations. And then it's a no brainer, but for most of us, there's a process to going, I kept thinking there was stuff there for me, but the more time I go back and forth, I just realized there really isn't anything there for me anymore. Nothing that I want anyways.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's the shifting of the consciousness, and then there's the output of it, right? And the thing in between is the intention. Because once the consciousness shifts, now we're doing things and producing things that are different. And so if you would imagine, there's do it for the profit, regardless. Fast food is a great way to do it, right? Put a McDonald's on every corner, Burger King on every corner. Look at all the things I get to choose from here. But if the intention is different, because clean food, clean planet, clean people.
And not because it's the right thing, but it's because it's the thing you desire. And this is huge, right? Because before in duality, we had to go, well, this is the right thing. when we move into alignment in this higher dimensional state, in this fifth dimensional place,
Yeah.
it's what is in resonance with, I want
Totally.
that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other things aren't an option anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like,
Yeah.
there's nothing appealing about that.
Yeah.
Whereas
But
fast food and appealing, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
greasy,
Yeah.
yummy. Like, I got to choose
Tasty.
not to have that because I want that. You come here
Right.
and you're like, I don't want that. That feels gross to me.
Yeah. 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 And when enough people are operating from that place of cleaner intention,
Mm-hmm.
the things that will be built will not be more McDonald's. There'll be
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
of the cleaner eating establishments.
Yeah.
And then it gets normalized because when in Rome, you're eating these things, and
Yeah.
then there'll be more places,
Yeah.
using Rome as the example.
Yeah. And even if the profits are not the same and the cost to purchase them, is more, like
Yeah.
it becomes so much less relevant because we just can't engage in that anymore. Like, there's a part of us that feels
Doesn't want
not
to support
good
it. Yeah.
when we're,
Right.
even if we're selling it, or if we're, whatever the support of it looks like, the keeping it alive. And that's all consciousness. It's not about thinking. Thinking is driven by consciousness. And this piece, like, I feel like that's the message I want to get out into the world so much. And the idea that it's so hard for people to wrap their head around until they're in the experience of, like, we can't shift people's thinking. Like, that's not where this starts. It originates in consciousness. When we help people shift their consciousness, their thinking shifts. And when we're putting our energy into trying to shift their thinking, it's just like, it's like if the temperature is 40 degrees out Fahrenheit, like, that's the temperature. And so, if we try to convince people that, like, it's a lot better to be in short sleeves, like, they're never going to want to be in short sleeves because they're going to get cold. They're going to go put on a jacket. But when we shift the temperature and now it's 80 degrees, and we don't even have to convince people to put short sleeves on, because, like, why would I be wearing long sleeves? It's 80 degrees out. And that's what happens with our thinking. Like, we're changing the temperature, or we're changing, whatever you want to use as that analogy, we're changing the thing that makes the way that we engage make sense in a different way, and the way we used to engage not make sense anymore. And that's the only thing that's going to change any of the stuff that we're all worried about and all upset about is consciousness. And the good news is it's changing no matter what. Do you want to be a part of the stability of it? Do you want to be a part of stabilizing it and moving it forward? And do you want to live from that place where you're getting to create a different temperature for yourself in your life and create from that place? Or do you want to be one of the people that's dragged along by the rest of us that are going, no, this is where we're headed. Let's go there. Let's start living the future now, because it's not really the future anymore. It's available here.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the common challenges that people have that you observe, David, when they're going from not aligned living to in aligned living? Like what are the things? I mean, you're talking about sometimes back and forth, and like, so what's that experience look like?
I would say the simplicity of it, and the idea that we can do something so simple and so easy and get the results. And what I've found is that, there's tons of stuff out there that's super complicated. There's certain specific ways you need to do it. There's all these rules around it. And I know the ego gets involved very quickly in those creations. And even when we participate in them, because it feels like, oh, I figured this out, this is super important. And the simplicity of aligned living throws people off. And what I've found too is like when we're really in something that's effective, it doesn't have a bunch of rules. It just has a very simple way of being that creates something very different that's profound. And that simplicity was funny. I was talking with a client day before yesterday, and he was saying how he's been involved in all these other activities that have all these rules and all these things you need to learn. And he's like, I keep coming back to aligned living though. And I go, when I do these simple things, I have the experience that I'm trying to create with all these other complicated things. And my brain wants so badly to engage in those complicated things because it's me figuring something out. It's me working through it. It's me, like creating the accomplishment versus just doing these simple steps and techniques to go, oh, this is what I was trying to accomplish. And the fact that it can be that simple, that we can just be there and live from that place, like our brain has a tough time with it. And quite often what I hear from people when I first start working with them is they go, gosh, I feel like I'm just not doing enough. It's just so simple. Like, what else can I be doing? And then in the same breath, they'll go, also, like, my other question was, I'm a little bit like, it's a little bit unnerving how much things are shifting in my life, how much my thinking has shifted. Maybe it's happening too quickly. Is there a way I can slow this down? And I go, so let me just kind of repeat back to you what you're saying. You want to know if there's something more you can be doing to create the changes that you're wanting to create, but they're happening too fast with what you're already doing, these simple things that you want to slow down the changes. And they're like, well, when you put it that way, it sounds kind of silly. I'm like, well, it sounds kind of silly.
Yeah,
right.
right. Well,
But
that sounds like an adjustment period.
yeah, and that's absolutely what it is. And so through that adjustment period, though, here's the other challenge is that
Yeah.
when we experience 3D duality, the
Yep. Yep.
struggle, the back and forth, the good and bad, the all the fear, all those things that are available, all the parts of ourselves that we're drawn into that aren't really our truest selves, our coping mechanisms, the way that we've found to deal with all the bullshit in the world, over here in one camp that we've been living our whole lives. And then we go and we find this clean, clear place where we're not so entangled in that. Like, it just feels like the next right action is very easy often. Sometimes the next right action is just like simply being. We go, well, I feel like I should be doing more. I should feel like I should be busier. But the internal state, the internal experience is very peaceful, very resonant with self. Like, it's like a lot of people describe it
Yeah.
like coming home. And then they go, then they get uncomfortable. And they're like, oh, well, I should take the bait. I should go back into this thing that, somebody's presenting me that I should be upset about, or, or it's wrong or whatever, or some cause. And then they go and get drawn into it. And they go from this internal experience of this high vibratory, really uplifting, just feel good experience into what quickly feels kind of like falling off a cliff, because they step into the world and they're just like, oh, I went from feeling fantastic to just feeling like shit. Like I ate something I shouldn't have. And that's really what you're doing. You're consuming something that is not in resonance with self. And the world is not in resonance with our true self. And so when we establish a place that is, and then go into the world that isn't, it hurts.
The world.
And
You
that's,
mean the people in it? It sounds like
the people,
situations
the
in it.
systems,
Yeah.
like engaging with the energy of it. Like, it's so dense and so heavy and so twisted, and there's just so much there to be upset about, versus when we move into our alignment and what's available there. And so when we bounce back and forth, as people generally do with that, like, it hurts. And they go, and when we can feel that good, and then we go from feeling good to a dense place where there's always something very wrong, like the experience of being like becomes like next level uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it trains us not to keep going back and forth.
Yeah. I remember going to simple example. I remember going to a restaurant and I was looking at the people. I forget if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I was just looking at the people and just noticing how they looked.
Yeah. Yeah.
The shape of their bodies, shall we say. And I'm like, that's the tell for me around, should I be eating here now?
Yeah.
Do I want to look like them? Yes or no? There's certain people with certain diets that eat at certain places.
Drawn to it. It's resonant to them and where they're at and where they're stuck.
Feels good. Oh man, sugary, salty, greasy, all the things you mentioned. Like you can't have enough of it. And then when you're talking about, like, that's the easy example to choose, right? And people talk about, if you're influenced by 5 people around you. So if they're whiny, complaining people who are always struggling, that's what you're going to have. If there's people who are always creating and looking for the solution to problems that show up because those are opportunities, well, that's 2 different groups, right? And one's gonna output one result, one's going to output a totally different result.
And I would argue the energy of those people is contagious to each other, which is shifting the consciousness.
Right. Which is, that was where I was going.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun on you. Sorry, Nick. I think that's the 3rd time I've done that today. Go ahead.
All good. So then it's not just the physical manifestations and the conversations, but it's like, what is the energy behind those things that created those things, and what is being created energetically in those groups, in those places? What is actually happening there at that level? Because that changes things. That sort of changes your operating system. The more that you're in it, the more that you're in it.
Your consciousness creates your thinking, and we keep trying to change people's thinking instead of helping them shift their consciousness. And when we focus on consciousness, frequency, vibration, our own alignment, it changes that, and people's thinking changes around us. And I find when people want to be stuck, when people want to be in their bullshit stories, they avoid me like the plague, because they know the moment they're in my energy field, their story is going to fall apart. And when people are seeking their truth, they can't get enough of being in my energy field because it helps them stabilize. And it's funny to me, like I watch friends just like blow me off hard. Like, like there's no way in hell I'm going to engage with you right now. And, first be like, what, like, really, dude? Like, I thought, but now it's kind of funny to me. I'm like, oh, they're wanting to hold an illusion. And, when they're done holding that illusion or wanting to hold it, they're going to come back around, and then they're going to want to connect a whole bunch because that's where they're at right now. They're ready to stabilize. They're ready to move past what that is. And, like when we realize how powerful our energy is when we stabilize in this and how it just takes away the bullshit. It's awesome. I always joke about it. It's like not even joke. Like the truth is, it's like a tractor beam that draws people in that want their authenticity, but it's also what I call the gift of rejection, where people that are trying to hold on to their bullshit are just so uninterested in you. And it's fantastic when we let it be.
And that's, and I found the same thing. And people, the more you do this type of thing, the more you're going to find.
Yeah.
People will self-select in, they will self-select out.
Yeah. And it may be phases too, right? Like I have a lot of close friends that need to avoid me sometimes because they don't want to spoil the story they're telling themselves. And when they get around me, they're like, thanks a lot. Like now this is all my responsibility. Now this is my doing. I liked it a lot better when it was their fault.
Blame can go a long way to doing nothing, but it can go a long way.
But it's only allowed by a consciousness. And when our consciousness shifts, we don't get to blame anymore. We get to go, what's my role in this? Oh, I'm seeing my coping mechanisms. I'm seeing the things that I'm doing. They're dismantling what I really want and creating this thing that I don't want. And now it's on me. And sure, other people's behavior and all of that, but ultimately that's not going to happen if we're in responsibility to ourselves and holding ourselves in this clean, clear place. It's always us doing it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this feels like a good kind of place to pull it together, because from here, it feels like there's a million rabbit holes we could go down. But the idea of this conversation today was really looking at the bigger mission of what we're doing here and inviting people into this, because when we're doing this for ourselves, which ultimately we are too, when we are in touch with the creation aspect of the bigger picture of playing a role in the shifting of the consciousness of humanity and the responsibility, which maybe is kind of a weird word to use here, but to me, like I feel like I've intentionally taken on that responsibility. And again, from this place, it just feels like, well, what's my responsibility is to just keep showing up and doing the things I'm doing. And so is that responsibility? I don't know. It serves me as much as it serves this purpose. But when I remember what this purpose is, it's kind of a doubling down. It's kind of like, well, this isn't just about my inner world. It's about what's happening on this planet and all the things that are just like horrifying that can only happen from a lower consciousness. And when the higher consciousness is stabilized, it breaks that shit up. It forces people to think and come from a different place. And that's the only thing that's going to change it. No argument, no debate, no conversation is going to change that. When people's consciousness is what it is, their thinking is connected with it, and it's predictable, and it's going to continue to play out until consciousness shifts, which is also predictable because that's what's happening. And so do you want to be a part of it, or do you want to get dragged along and be in the discomfort of the wake of the shifting in consciousness? Because when you're a few steps behind, you're in the fray all the time, and it's always uncomfortable, and there's always something wrong, and there's always something scary. And when you're stabilizing the place that we're all moving into, we get to be part of the solution rather than getting dragged behind the solution creators.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So choose. It's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And ultimately it serves you. Yeah.
And everyone else.
Absolutely. Right. So yeah, it's fun. It was funny how it hit me this morning of like, man, people are ready to get in touch with the bigger picture of this. Like it's going to make a lot more sense to people right now for whatever's happening with consciousness. Like the idea of being part of this, purposeful, huge.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are driven by their own experience, but maybe when they're in touch with that bigger experience of, like you look at all the people that are focused on activism, like absolutely we need that. but that internal experience of being in activism, there's often a lot of anger. There's often a lot of, like this is not okay. This is scary. Like, threat, all lower frequency things trying to create something good, and again, when we realize the futility of that, like we've just made ourselves uncomfortable trying to solve a problem that we're not solving, and we've needed that, but there's a new era, which is about consciousness, and it's ready to shift.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Awesome. Nice. Well, this is probably a good one for questions too. And so please submit when, there's, we'd love to hear from you all, what you think, what else you'd like us to tap into and share about, because this conversation about the difference between shifting through consciousness versus shifting through convincing others, it's a big one, and it's so important because when we put our energy into trying to shift people's thinking without, it only changes through their consciousness, not through their thinking. Their thinking is driven by their consciousness.
Yeah. Nice.
Awesome. Well, have a great week, everyone. And we'll see y'all next week.
Bye, folks.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast. And if you did, please subscribe so you can catch the next episode. If you want to learn more about the Aligned Living System and how it could support you in your life, check out davidwaldas.com.